Did you know that not all of us can be Christians? Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think this is something that all Christians believe, but just like some Christians believe that everything is preordained, predetermined, that God has already laid everything out, and you're just following along, which kind of is the opposite of the free will doctrine that is very popular with Christians. But the basic point here is this. There are references in the Bible stating that God will harden some people's hearts. God will turn some people away from Jesus, from Christianity, from the Judaism that Christianity came from. And when I say the Judaism that Christianity came from, I mean literally the Christian Jews. Because it was hundreds of years before the Jews gave an ultimatum to the Christians to either become fully Jewish or leave. And some went one way, some went the other way. But in the Bible, it talks about, in the Old Testament and I think in the New Testament as well, that some people will be turned away by God. Some people will have their hearts hardened. Some people will be kind of fiddled with in order to make that person not join Christianity. And I actually had that argument used on me by my cousin not too long ago, which I wasn't happy about because I've told them repeatedly not to proselytize me over the decades. And they don't respect that because they're convinced they're right and everybody else is wrong. And that's the arrogance of certainty. You think you're right, and therefore you are right, and therefore you have the right to do whatever you want, which is also the problem with Christian nationalists. They think that because they're right, that what they're going to do is right and is what God wants, and Christian nationalists are fascists. So no, that isn't what God wants. But therefore, you could be somebody like me who grew up Christian and then you fell out. And that would be because God pushed you out. God, for whatever reason, wisdom beyond your understanding, didn't want you in his little clique or big clique. So, therefore, although Christians are taught to proselytize everybody, regardless of whether it's being disrespectful or if it's wanted, and that's probably part of the reason why we used to have separation of church and state, because people got tired of it being done everywhere. I've had it happen to me in work a couple of years ago. It was very offensive too, because ultimately I'd been very honest with this little Latin American. I mean, literally from Latin America. She had moved from Mexico when she was young, and I've been very honest with her, very open with her, explaining why I am a deist and not a Christian. And in the end, she asked me a question, and I answered it. It was about my wife. And suddenly she called me a liar. And I was so pissed off. That was so uncalled for, so rude, and so dishonest. Very manipulative. And that's something else that I don't like about proselytization. Proselytization is that sometimes it can be very manipulative. Love bombing, for example, guilt tripping, all that stuff. And my cousins did that to me, the love bombing and then the guilt tripping. And then her husband accused me of being a bad father. And it's just the nerve, you know. But, sorry, the wound is still there. He apologized to me for certain things, certain words he used against me. Or no. He apologized to me for the way he spoke to me, the tone. But he didn't apologize for his insults. He didn't apologize for his disrespect either. And that's just one of the things I just hate about talking to Christians is, and people from other religions who are very, very certain they're correct, is this arrogance, this pride takes over their ability to realize I should be humble about this, not rub it in their face. I shouldn't rub it in. You should never rub your religion in anybody's face. And anybody who does rub religion in your face is not a good example of that religion, is not somebody who should be speaking for that religion. Unless, as J.D. Vance discovered this weekend, they deserve to have their face rubbed in the poop of their bad behavior, which is what happened when he went to meet the Pope. He had his face rubbed in it because of his very, very bad behavior as Veep, the vice president of evil. So yeah, so there's a chance that you're not going to be a Christian. And even if you join, there's a chance that you'll stop being a Christian. And it's all because of God's will. So not everybody will ever be saved. So God is deliberately according to Christian belief and Jewish belief, Jewish belief and therefore Christian belief, not everybody can go into the kingdom of heaven. And there are some sects in Christianity that are very restrictive as to how many people can get in, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, I think Seventh-day Adventists, and Mormons, which, by the way, are all related to each other. They come from the same quack group of people. But at least the Seventh-day Adventists don't eat wrong. They take care of themselves. But yeah, so according to this belief, God is preventing people from entering the kingdom of heaven for reasons we don't understand. So God pushed me out of Christianity, and everybody's attempts to get me back into Christianity have failed because God will not allow me to go to heaven. What did I do that was so horrible, God? Why? If you are so confident in your religion that you feel you have the right to turn this nation into a Christian nation, then I will remind you that when South Africa was still a democracy, the first prime minister, I don't think he was prime minister at the time, made a speech in which he said that there was no difference between the Christian nationalists in South Africa, the Nazis, and the Italian fascists. They were the same. Now, let's keep in mind also that Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, he had his family in Canada long before, he grew up in Canada, and he moved his family to South Africa because during World War II, he and some others plotted to overthrow the government of Canada to turn it into a fascist state in the image of Nazi Germany. They were caught. They were imprisoned. His life was not so happy after that, so he moved to South Africa, where he and others started up this fascist state in South Africa. And, other families like the Thiel family, or Thiel, however you say it, were also part of that clique of people who were profiting from the misery of the blacks. So this whole thing that they say about blacks isn't true. It's because of what they do to the blacks that it seems to be true. When you oppress a people, when you deliberately sow the seeds of strife, discord, and distrust, and drug addiction within a group of people, you essentially are destroying them forever. Because it is so hard for a minority group to rise up as out of that trap that's been set. It is still working to become fully functioning. You may look at the black culture, for example, as being broken, and it is. And the people who broke it were white. Hoover, the head of the FBI, used the FBI to hire ex-cons and convicts, that is, to infiltrate the Black Panthers, to infiltrate Martin Luther King's organization, to sow discord, and even to commit acts of murder and other crimes on penalty of going to jail and serving a worse sentence than before. Hoover was a disgusting, despicable man, and I wish that somebody had given him what he deserved. I'm sure that when Trump dies, they'll be in the same place together, and with Vance too, and all those other losers in the administration. Yeah, you don't want to hear me calling these people names. They're destroying our country. They're destroying our government. I'll call them names. I have been called names by so many people on the left and the right because I'm a centrist, and each side assumes I'm the other side. Nobody seems to understand there's more than two sides, folks. But I have digressed from the topic. So I implore you, religious folks, if you think that your religion is so great that you have to shove it down other people's throats, I would ask you to remember what your religion says about pride, about arrogance, before you open your mouth and distort somebody's reality. Your proselytization might help some people, but it hurts others. It destroys families. And I know that Jesus said he was going to tear families apart. He was going to tear father from son, mother from daughter, father from daughter, mother from son, parents from children, all that kind of stuff. He said all that crap, which indicates what kind of a man he really was. A con artist. And I'm being generous. Those are the words of a narcissist. If you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine. As of yet, this is still America. I still have the right of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and so on. It hasn't yet been taken from Americans. But let's give it some time, and I'm sure Trump will surprise nobody except for the idiots who believe him. Now, I'm going to stop before I really get going because this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. So thank you for watching and have a great day.